deep dive. I want you to imagine, just for a second, standing in the middle of a massive open-air festival ground.
Oh, yeah. Just thousands of people everywhere.
Right. Or, honestly, just think about your own daily routine. Maybe you're sitting in a coffee shop, or you're throwing on a curated playlist during your morning commute. You are highly likely hearing it.
You definitely are.
It's this relentless, hypnotic pulse. You know, that specific four-on-the-floor beat, anchored by this rolling, muscular bass line.
And usually punctuated by those minimal, repetitive vocal chops.
Exactly. We are talking about tech house. And here in the year 2026, it is no longer just a popular electronic subgenre. It has violently and absolutely become the dominant mainstream culture.
Yeah, the sheer scale of it is what makes this moment in music history so fascinating to me. We're looking at a genre that has entirely monopolized the cultural bandwidth.
Completely.
Like, it has transitioned from an underground discovery, something you had to actively seek out in these dark, sweaty basement clubs, into just a massive global commodity.
Which brings us to a stack of internal documents we've gotten our hands on for this deep dive. Because today, we are looking at an internal editorial framework and some highly detailed production notes from 786 Music Publishing, LLC.
Right, the Miami-based independent label.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, these aren't press releases or like marketing spin. These are the raw, unvarnished marching orders they use to navigate an industry that is essentially turned into a monoculture.
And having access to this specific internal blueprint, it offers this really rare window into the survival mechanics of a modern independent label, because they're trying to solve a brutal mathematical problem right now.
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
When a genre takes over the world to this degree, how does an independent artist avoid just being swallowed whole by the machine?
Okay, let's unpack this, because the internal data highlighted in these notes paints a picture of saturation that is almost hard to comprehend.
It really is staggering.
I mean, we are talking about tens of thousands of tracks uploaded to streaming platforms every single week. Tech House isn't just leading in sales, it has a complete stranglehold on playlist data and festival bookings.
From the massive main stages all the way down to the smallest side tents.
Right. It is completely ubiquitous.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, massive popularity actually becomes a formidable barrier to entry for new talent.
Yeah, which sounds counterintuitive, right?
It does. Because the conventional wisdom is that a booming market creates more opportunity. But when the market is this insanely saturated, visibility becomes a monumental challenge.
You're just a drop in the ocean at that point.
Exactly. You are swimming in an endless, sprawling sea of tech house. You aren't just competing with the heavyweights of the genre, you are competing with literally an army of producers who are generating tracks that sound virtually identical to yours.
It reminds me of gentrification, actually.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Well, specifically what happens when a really cool artsy neighborhood suddenly gets a little too trendy. At first, you have these amazing original indie coffee shops. The baristas are obsessed with the roast. The interior design is quirky because it was built by hand,
Yeah, it's authentic. The pioneers who established the aesthetic.
Exactly. That authenticity is what makes the neighborhood cool in the first place. But then, real estate developers notice the foot traffic.
Right, and here come the chains.
Yes. Massive corporate chains start buying up the leases on every single corner. But they intentionally mimic the aesthetic of those original indie places.
Oh, right.
So they slap up faux exposed brick, they hang those ubiquitous Edison bulbs, they serve matcha lattes in mason jars, and seemingly overnight, the entire neighborhood is buried under this avalanche of perfectly calculated, focus-grouped replication. The soul is gone, and it's replaced by a formula.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize what is happening inside the digital audio workstations of thousands of producers right now.
Is it really that direct of a parallel?
Oh, absolutely. The internal notes from 786 Music highlight this explicitly. The average producer in 2026 is essentially handing the sonic equivalent of Edison bulbs.
I love that.
I mean, they are buying the exact same commercially available sample packs. They are using the identical preset synthesizer sounds. They apply the same arrangement templates.
So they're just assembling the pieces.
Literally, they drag a pre-made kick drum loop into their software, layer a pre-made bass line underneath it, and call it a track.
Yeah, but if every single block has the exact same exposed brick, the consumer eventually goes blind to it, right?
Precisely. They stop noticing.
So how do we physically distinguish the actual innovators from the copycats? If the surface level aesthetic is completely identical, the differentiation has to be happening somewhere else.
Well, the differentiation is happening on a microscopic structural level, and that brings us to a massive schism that is currently fracturing the genre. The source material notes a strict technical separation between the quote-unquote average output, which is drifting heavily toward formula, and the exceptional producers who are aggressively pushing the sound forward.
Okay, I want to stop and define that, because throwing around the phrase technical separation can sound a bit academic.
Fair enough.
What does that actually sound like to the human ear? Like, if two tracks are both 126 beats per minute, and they both have a kick drum and a bass line, how does the listener actually hear a technical difference?
It comes down to the physics of the sound design.
The physics?
Yeah. Take something as simple as a snare drum hitting. An average producer uses a flat, pre-packaged sample. Sounds fine. But an exceptional producer focuses on the transient.
The transient meaning the start of the sound.
Exactly. The transient is that very first microsecond crack of the sound before the body of the drum actually rings out.
Right. Go.
They will use advanced software compression to bend and shape that specific microsecond so that instead of just hearing the snare, you actually feel it physically tapping against your eardrum.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it punches through a crowded mix with incredible clarity without simply being turned up louder.
It's kind of like it's the difference between looking at a two-dimensional photograph of a room versus putting on a VR headset and actually standing inside the room.
Yes, that is a perfect analogy. And that leads perfectly into the second major technical divider, which is advanced spatial mixing.
Spatial mixing, meaning where the sound sits.
Right. The exceptional producers are treating their audio mix like physical architecture. They aren't just stacking sounds on top of each other, they are carving out a literal three-dimensional acoustic space.
So they're building a room for the listener.
They are. They engineer the bass to live deep in the basement of the stereo field to anchor the track. The kick drum sits dead center right in front of your nose.
So you can feel it hit.
Exactly. And the atmospheric synthesizers, they are pushed incredibly wide, floating near the ceiling. When you listen on a good system, or even just decent headphones, the music completely envelops you.
And the average track doesn't do that.
Not at all. The average track just feels like a flat wall of noise. The exceptional track feels like a physical environment you can walk around in.
You know, I'd ask you, the listener, to think about your own Spotify playlists for a second. How often do you just let the algorithm feed you something predictable because you're tired, versus actually seeking out a track that demands your attention?
It's a very different experience.
It is. The formulaic track just requires passive consumption. That's background noise. But the exceptional track with that three-dimensional spatial mixing, it requires active listening.
It's like the exceptional producers are building custom furniture from raw timber, while the average producers are assembling flat-pack furniture using an Allen wrench.
Right.
They both give you a chair, but only one is actually built to last.
But hold on. I need to challenge this premise for a second.
Let's hear it.
We are talking about dance music here. We are talking about sweaty, pulsating rooms packed with thousands of people who have been on their feet for hours, maybe drinking, maybe partying. They aren't sitting in a quiet room with audiophile headphones analyzing the transients of a snare drum. They want to move.
Yeah.
So isn't the formula exactly what they want?
That is the big question.
Right. Because they want the predictable drop.
Yeah.
They want that recognizable four-on-the-floor beat, so they know exactly when to jump, when to raise their hands, and when to cheer.
True.
So if you're an independent producer and you focus entirely on pushing the sound forward into this avant-garde acoustic architecture, don't you risk alienating the massive global audience that made tech house the #1 genre in the first place? Like, if you get too weird, you just clear the dance floor.
Well, you've just isolated the core tension of modern dance music.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate tightrope walk. Because you're right, if the music becomes entirely an academic exercise in sound design, it completely loses its functional utility.
A club track has to make people dance.
Exactly. This exact dilemma, pleasing the crowd by delivering what they biologically respond to versus pushing the boundaries of what the genre can be. This is the literal puzzle 786 Music is trying to solve.
That sounds incredibly difficult.
It is. You have to honor the functional requirements of the dance floor while totally refusing to succumb to the soul-crushing boredom of that gentrified formula we talked about.
Which feels like an impossible task. If you give them what they want, you're boring. If you give them something totally new, you're alienating. So how does an independent label actually navigate that?
Well, the production notes provide a really highly specific case study on a producer named Edwin DaCosta.
Okay.
The internal framework describes his production strategy as positioning 76 music both, quote, within and against the current tech house landscape.
Within and against. Let's break down the within part first.
Sure.
Because I'm thinking about the functional mechanics of how music gets played in clubs. Like if I'm a club DJ, my literal job is to seamlessly blend tracks together for 3 hours.
Right, you can't have awkward silences.
No, I need structural predictability. I need that 126 BPM. I need a 16-bar intro with just a kick drum and a hi-hat so I can manually beat match it and blend it into the previous song. So if Edwin DaCosta hands me this brilliantly innovative track that starts with an ambient, swirling synthesizer and absolutely no beat, I physically cannot mix it into my set. It's functionally useless to me, no matter how good the transients sound.
And you've just nailed the primary survival tactic of operating within the landscape.
Oh, okay. So it's about utility.
Totally.
Yeah.
You have to speak the native language of the DJ and the 2026 festival crowd. The tempo has to be correct. The kick drum has to have the right weight. The structural arrangement has to be mixable.
You have to play the game to get in the door.
Right. You establish a foundation of trust with the listener and the DJ. You invite them into a room they recognize.
But then you operate against them.
Precisely. You use that familiar structure as a Trojan horse.
Oh, I love that. A Trojan horse.
Once the listener is comfortable, once their brain thinks it knows exactly where the track is going, you introduce highly complex boundary-pushing elements.
Like what? What does he do?
So Edwin DaCosta will deliver the exact structural drop the crowd is waiting for, but the texture of the bass line that hits will be completely alien.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe he's layered organic Foley sounds like the crunching of glass underneath the sub bass to give it a gritty, unfamiliar texture.
Wow.
Or he might manipulate the rhythm of the hi-hats, shifting them slightly off the grid by just a few milliseconds.
To make it human.
Exactly, to create this subliminal swinging groove that you can't quite identify, but your body feels it.
Oh.
He is smuggling genuine avant-garde innovation inside a highly commercial, digestible package.
A Trojan horse for innovation.
Yeah.
I love how that frames the creative process. It turns the producer into a smuggler.
It really does.
And that philosophy leads directly into what the source documents print almost like a manifesto. Their ultimate rule is stated so simply, they just say, the vibe is the only rule.
Which is funny, right? Because for a label that dedicates pages of internal notes to dissecting spatial mixing and acoustic pressure, declaring the vibe is the only rule seems remarkably unscientific.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because there is a massive, glaring contradiction there.
Oh, huge.
We just spent this entire deep dive establishing that there is a strict, microscopic technical separation between average and exceptional tracks.
Hours of meticulous labor.
Right. It takes hours of mathematical labor to sculpt those transients and build that three-dimensional room. But then the label turns around and says, forget the math. The vibe is the only rule.
Yep.
Let's follow that logic for a second.
Yeah.
Are they using extreme technical mastery specifically to hide the technique?
Mm-hmm.
Is the goal of true technical perfection to become entirely invisible, leaving the listener with absolutely nothing but pure, unfiltered feeling?
What's fascinating here is that you've just bypassed the mechanics and hit on the psychology of high-level artistry.
Really?
Yes, that is precisely the strategy. Think about an amateur producer who just learned a complex new trick in their software.
Okay, like what?
Say, a wild panning effect that whips the sound violently from the left speaker to the right speaker. They're going to use that trick loudly and constantly because they want everyone to know they figured it out.
Right, look what I can do.
Exactly. The track becomes an advertisement for the producer's software skills. The technique distracts from the music. It's loud, it's obvious, and it's driven by ego.
They are begging you to look at the brushstrokes instead of the painting.
That is a brilliant way to put it. But when you listen to a master at work, the technique vanishes into the emotion of the song. The technical evolution serves the feeling, not the other way around.
So the vibe really is the only rule.
Yes.
Right.
When 786 Music declares the vibe is the only rule, they aren't dismissing the hundreds of hours Edwin DaCosta spends shaping drum samples. They are establishing a brutal quality control metric.
How so?
They're saying that all the obsessive, microscopic, technical wizardry in the world is completely useless if it doesn't make the listener actually feel something profound on the dance floor.
Wow. Okay, I see.
The technique is merely the engine. The vibe is the destination. I mean, when you are blasting down the highway staring at a beautiful sunset, you shouldn't be thinking about the pistons firing under the hood.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. So the average tracks rely on the gentrified formula because they simply lack the technical chops to conjure a genuine vibe from scratch.
Exactly. So they just borrow a pre-packaged one from a sample pack.
But the exceptional tracks, the ones operating within and against the machine, they're utilizing these mind-bending technical skills to craft an atmosphere so immersive and so seamless that the listener doesn't even realize they are hearing the future of sound design.
They don't have time to overthink it.
You're right, they just know. They've closed their eyes and they can't stop dancing.
And honestly, this is the definitive blueprint for how an independent label survives a monoculture. You cannot outspend the major labels.
No way.
You cannot outmarket the festival headliners who have millions of followers.
Impossible.
And you certainly cannot flood the zone with more tracks than the streaming algorithms can process. The only viable path forward is to offer an experience so undeniably, viscerally authentic that it shatters the white noise of the formula.
You have to offer the magic that the algorithm cannot replicate.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean for us, the listener? If we zoom out and look at the landscape of 2026, Tech House is sitting at a critical inflection point.
It really is.
Its absolute biggest threat isn't a rival genre. Its biggest threat is its own massive, suffocating success and the inevitable lazy drift toward perfectly replicated boredom.
The endless sea of identical tracks.
Right. But the antidote, the cure for that overwhelming saturation is a relentless, uncompromising focus on technical exceptionalism. An exceptionalism that is brilliantly disguised as pure vibe. It's about building a better, stealthier Trojan horse.
And history shows us that when a culture feels completely corporatized, mapped out, and solved, the underground always finds a way to mutate. There are always artists in a studio somewhere pulling apart the machinery, operating both within the system and aggressively against it.
Which actually leaves you with one final, totally different thread to pull on.
Oh.
Yeah, because we've spent this entire time dissecting technical perfection. We've established that the average Tech House track in 2026 has become completely crystallized into this flawlessly polished, mathematically predictable, beautifully mixed formula.
Super clean.
Right. Everything sounds impeccably clean and perfectly quantized. But if perfection has become the boring, ubiquitous standard, will the next massive underground electronic revolution be a genre that explicitly breaks every single technical rule?
Oh, man.
Like, will the future of dance music belong to artists who make music that is intentionally raw, heavily distorted, unpolished, and technically wrong just to shock the system back to life?
That is a wild thought.
When everyone else is rendering pristine, three-dimensional digital art, is the only rebellion left to just throw a bucket of physical paint at the canvas?
A sonic punk rock revolution to counter the era of digital perfection. I mean, it's an incredible premise. Whenever the pendulum swings too far toward pristine polish, a raw, abrasive underground reaction is usually gathering strength in the shadows.
Definitely something to keep an ear out for next time you're standing in front of a massive speaker stack. Thank you so much for joining us and taking this deep dive today. It's a wildly complex sonic landscape out there, and we love breaking it down with you. Stay curious, keep actively listening, and we will catch you on the next one.